can actually get into building the minivan campaign itself. Next slide, please. So the first thing I want to talk about is minivan formats. One of the first things you'll be able to do when you go to create a minivan campaign is to choose the minivan format. What a minivan format is it basically just determines what kind of information about your list or your contacts that your canvassers will see when they log into minivan app and start canvassing your list. It usually comes preloaded with a very standard door format as well as a standard phone format, but you can customize your door format, which is what you would use for walking canvases, to your campaign's needs. So for example, your door format, you might say, hey, we want a custom one that also shows who else lives in the household. That way we can talk to, and canvas not just the person on our list, but the people in their household if we have a chance to bring them into the conversation. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and take over screen sharing. So Victoria, let me go ahead and jump in there, and I'm going to walk you through creating a minivan campaign. All right. Gotta expand that. Gotta find my share. Gotta go to my SmartVan and hit share. All right, here we are. So back to the old familiar SmartVan homepage. There are two places you can get to your minivan campaign. You can either come here to your side menu. If you have access to minivan campaigns, it'll show up like this. Or you can come to the administrative menu on your homepage, open up the minivan menu here, and go to minivan campaigns from here. You'll see we don't have any minivan campaigns loaded right now. So I'm going to add a new minivan campaign. Again, it's going to ask me for my format. I'm going to use the default minivan format. For my minivan campaign name, we're going to make sure that we're naming it the way that our campaigns need to work. I'm going to name it training campaign. Description, make sure again that anyone who in your organization who looks at this campaign can understand what it's for. So call this a practice, walk canvas campaign from data for field training. Contacted how, this is where you choose what kind of canvassing this minivan campaign relates to. So this is a door-to-door walking canvas. I'm going to say walk. If I was doing phone banking, I would choose phone. If this was, an event, a meeting, we would choose that. But I'm going to use walk. And then script. You can choose different scripts. You can have alternate scripts. I'm going to say we're going to stick with one script for everyone on our canvas. That's most common. And then I'm going to find the training script that we put together earlier. So you'll see like, oh yeah, look at that naming convention. This is part of the same campaign. You can also add a new script from this point in time. It kind of like makes you go back and forth. It's not as organized, which is why we recommend you build all of these things beforehand. There's another thing that minivan does, which let's say you are canvassing during the week, and on the weekend you are planning a big weekend of action. You're going to do a big canvas launch. You want to invite the people that you are talking to at the doors to come out to, have, I don't know, let's say barbecue, and it's a big canvas launch. You're going to have a barbecue, and then you're going to all go out and you're going to canvas. You want to invite the people that you talk to at the doors to come and join you. So if you have a mobilize event or a mobilize link for that event, you can embed it here in your minivan campaign, and it will show up as something that you can just shift people to as part of your script. You're going through your phone, you're clicking their responses, and then you'll just be able to like sign them up for this event like that. And then advanced here, it's asking you if you want to auto sync. Auto sync means that whenever the minivan app gets a chance to sync your canvasser's data, it will, without the canvasser having to hit sync for themselves. I think it's probably best practice, especially for how the app is moving forward with committing data, which we'll talk about later, to have auto sync enabled. That way you don't risk losing any data, and your canvassers can still hit sync, but this will make sure that it's syncing the data back to your CRM on a regular basis whenever it can. And then we could just go ahead and hit save. And we've got a minivan campaign. Let's see. So now we've got our script, we've got our list, we've got our minivan campaign. Our last step before we can launch is to cut turf. And I'm going to hand it to Brandon to talk to us about cutting turf.
Sweet. Can we get the screen to pop up real quick?
Oh yeah, I forgot. I need to share my screen for okay, go ahead. Thanks, Victoria.
Yeah, thanks. Cool. So thank you, Desiree, for walking through that. We've got our campaign now. So now we've got to do the fun thing, which is cut turf. It's fun, it's exciting, but it's also frustrating at the same time. And I think it's very important that you come into it with an open mind and preparation for time to be spent because it takes time. Cool. So at the beginning, yeah, so we'll talk about this first. So before you go in and cut turf, you do need to know that they do have a limit to how many people or how many households you can have in a single turf. It is 10,000 people or 5,000 households. That's broken down two per household. And one thing to note is that, for one, I don't think anyone here is going to be doing one turf of 10,000 people. That's kind of crazy. Yeah. Anyways, a turf cutter is basically just a tool you use in order to make sure that your maps are evenly split up. And so when you're handing these pieces out to your canvassers, canvassers will take a single turf, go out to the doors, and then if they have time, go get another turf. It can be cut up 50 doors, 100 doors, just depending on how you foresee someone being able to get through however many doors in about an hour. That's kind of the average gauge you use. And so we use field math to determine the size of the turf. So how many doors can a canvasser knock in an hour? I've seen 20, I've seen 100. Some people may be lying. We'll see, right? Um, but the biggest thing is like use your best guess. And then another thing is how many hours is there in a shift? Are you out in the field for 2 to 3 hours? Are you out in the field for a little bit less, a little bit more? All of this is used in order to determine how big your chunk of turf is going to be. Another one is how many shifts for your canvas event. So are you going to have one crew come in the morning and then another crew come in the afternoon, right? So there's so many different things to consider when you're going out there. So let's think about this for a second. If you're planning to canvas where your goal is to have 15 canvassers, knock 100 doors each, your list would probably want to contain at least 1,500 doors or maybe about 2,000 just to be safe. And so another example, if you believe canvassers can knock about 50 doors per hour and you want turf where they can knock doors for a 2 hour shift, you might want to cut a turf in a way that it's at least about 120 doors. So you want to shoot for a little bit more because some houses, of course, you'll zoom through because maybe it's inaccessible, maybe there's no one home, so you click not home. So you can get through those pretty quickly depending on the time of day that you go and where you are and where your turf is located. But that's generally the thought process. Um, this is a great thing to do, so let's jump into it. Next slide, please. So let's cut some turf. We're gonna hop into van real quick. And we're gonna, do we have a list already? Dope. Awesome. So what you're gonna do is go into a thing. Sorry, let me zoom in on my personal screen.
One second, I'm gonna actually edit this so that we see what happens if you have too many people.
Oh, I love it. Good. Yeah, but essentially when you're creating turf, you go in through your list. So you build your list, you build your campaign, and you assign that list to the campaign. And then there's a section in there where you're gonna click on cut turf through the list that you build. And then that's how you get to the wonderful turf cutting tool. We're gonna see it here in just a second. Okay, boom. Craziness. So you have 45,000 people in your list, right? It's not gonna let you do that. It's unrealistic. So let's pare down. Dope. Okay, so we've got 2,800 people, 673 doors. I like to look at both of those numbers. So you're gonna press that cut turf button and it's going to load a map. So you will see a bunch of black dots on the screen. So we're in Flagstaff right now. There's some dots. If we zoom all the way in, you're gonna start to see a neighborhood. Dope. And so right here, this is where we are in our little map. And so we're going to want to do a thing called cutting turf. And so we have some tools to use. Right now, we have a legend that says there are 559 unassigned doors and 0 doors are selected. Throughout your time cutting the turf, you want to pay attention to that. And so you have this little tool here, and if you drag it, yeah, you can begin to populate a single piece of turf. And so now Desiree has created a lovely little box. Within that box, it is turned green. And so now you have assigned one turf and it says 52 doors. Now there's a little black dot right outside of it. You can use that to slide over and now it's in your turf. So that's something you have to keep an eye out for because sometimes you will miss a little black dot, and those little black dots could be like 10 people, right? And so you need to make sure you need to make sure that you are covering the area that you're wanting to select. And so we've created one turf. That's awesome. So we're gonna go in now and try to do another little box. So we click on a little corner, another corner that creates a line, and then you do it again. It creates another line, more surface area is covered, and then boom, we've got another turf. It looks like a little house. This one is red, so this is to differentiate between the two different turfs. So we have turf one with 53 doors, we have turf two with 100 doors. And so you see, this isn't too bad. Thankfully, this is a beautifully constructed neighborhood where all doors are right next to each other, which is great. But that won't be the case sometimes. One thing to note is that you have a turf of 53 and you have a turf of 100, right? Um, so there's a difference. You may want to make it to where each one is 50 doors or each one is 60 doors. But you have to look at the total number of doors that you have. So I think we had like a little bit over 600 doors. So if you want to make it proportionate, you can try to capture so it's 50, 50, 50, 50, or 100, 100, 100, 100. But these are just little pieces of information as you're going through to make the turf. Right, now we're closer. So it's really just figuring it out and drawing some dots and trying to align it. That's all it really is. It can be more complicated. I think if we can delete the turf and use the auto one real quick. So there's a tool, so auto cut, and you can go in here and say, I want an equal number of addresses per turf, and I want, let's go 10 pieces of turf. And then you click auto cut. Crazy. Okay. So we see you have some larger surface area maps, and that's because you have homes that are spanning all the way over here. Because when we pulled our list, we included a situation where there are homes all the way in different cities in the state. But if we want to just focus on this little neighborhood, we can move from here. So you can edit each and every single turf that was auto created to fit the guidelines that you want. But just know that AutoCut is not perfect, obviously. And so while close up, this does look nice, there are like a bunch of different wonky looking things, some outliers, right? So this looks weird, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, this is just a tool, and this is how you cut your turf. Um, Desiree, do you think there's anything that we're missing from anything we need to show them on this?
I mean, auto turf cutter can be helpful, can be wild like this. Um, like Brandon says, getting them like perfectly situated the way you want can take time. The only other things I would say is like what's good turf and what's bad turf, right? I don't know if you want to go into that, Brandon.
Yeah, yeah. So I think there's some criteria for good turf and bad turf. One thing I mean, something I like to see is it proportional? If I'm leading a big canvassing event, I want to make sure that I have turfs that are equal. So maybe I'll utilize the auto cut to give me an idea of what it could look like, and then erase it and do it myself. And say, okay, I want each one to be around 50 doors, but it can't be wonky. So if we zoom in on the orange turf real quick, so that's one turf. On the ground, if you give canvassers this, they're not going to like you because you've got a few that are on a couple different streets that are right next to each other, but when you're walking, and especially people who don't have access to transportation, you're having to walk so far to get and complete your turf. So a good turf is where if we go to I think it's the pink one, that one's leaning towards good because it's a nice little area where people can walk. It's walkable. The houses are right next to each other. You're not having to go across a highway. You're not having to go across nature to get to a house. They're all right next to each other, and you probably won't have to get into a car too much to complete this turf. So good turf is where it's walkable. The homes are right next to each other. There are no geographical barriers. It's manageable in the time frame that you give canvassers. Um, is there something else I'm missing? I feel like I'm missing something else.
No, I would just say like this red turf, the way that it crosses a park, it comes up over like if your turf looks gerrymandered, it's probably not
Yeah.
like the most accessible turf. And you're probably gonna be wasting resources and you're wasting your canvassers' time, and you're wasting their energy, and you are probably like not giving your volunteer canvassers a good experience and they might not come back and work with you. So yeah, avoid having folks cross major streets, avoid them having to cross highways to complete their turf, nature, and yeah, keeping them to like nice walkable blocks is really ideal.
Yeah, you just brought up a good point. I think so when you're cutting the turf, of course you have this map here that you can use to look, but I would go back and even look at like Google Maps or any other map to see am I cutting through something that isn't featured over here? Right. So we see even right outside of the turf, there's like a bunch of different trees. There's desert right there. So those are things to look out for. Are there big old stadiums? Is there a particular area where it's like restaurants and then homes? So like just be mindful of where you are, and that will help you prepare yourself to cut turf. We can go ahead and move to the next. Dope. So we cut our turf. It's not pretty, but we cut it. We cut it. And so now what do we do with it? So we're gonna talk about um, loading a list, exporting it to cut turf. So we just did that. And how do we export it? How do we save it? So when we save this, we go into the folder that we created for the campaign. And so right here it says training test folder. And then we're going to name the specific region. So when you make multiple turfs, it's crucial to be very specific when you're naming, just how Desiree was talking about your campaign, how Desiree was talking about everything else that you named. This is important. So we're going to call it, what does that say? Oh,
Oh,
okay.
Belmont. And then I
Belmont.
put '06. You know, you're gonna have if you're canvassing by precincts or by legislative districts or by, oh, we're running three canvases this week. This is canvas one, canvas two, canvas three. You'll probably have some kind of number to delineate where your turf is in the work you're doing. So Belmont, that's the community we were looking at. Six, um, I'm just saying like let's say that's the precinct that you know, we're canvassing with. And then yeah, description.
Dope. Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. You can do Belmont 5, Belmont 4, Belmont 3, just as long as you know, as like the canvassing manager or the field director or someone who's in charge. Make sure you know and you're able to communicate that effectively to those who are going to be on the ground. And you can also look at all this stuff in real time as people are looking, as people are canvassing on the doors. You can check and see progress. You can check and see all these different things. So if you write in the description, everything you need, and then you can save it. So now it's saved and it pops up as turf. Dope. And so we just made turf. We just cut turf. And so you can see the progress, you can see the doors, you can see the status, you can see all this information as the manager of the campaign. One thing to look at is if you go to the drop down on the progress. Oh, wait, no. Yes, quick actions first. So one big piece is the generate list number. So that is going to be very crucial. People usually operate off of list numbers. You can send that out. Canvassers will have that number and will let you know what they have. But once that is generated, um, people can type in that list number into their phones, and then they can receive the turf that you just made. So that's pretty intuitive. Okay, cool. Think we're good?
Think we're good. I think we're here.
Let's get it. Let's practice cutting some turf. Obviously, we're creating this with the assumption that people don't have access to um, minivan, and so we are going to use lovely Jamboard. So I just put it in the chat. We're going to go into breakout rooms again and just kind of talk about how we would cut this specific turf. We can use the draw tool on Jamboard in order to do your best and cut the turf how your group would see it best. And so you can get real creative with this. There's not one way to do it. There's multiple ways, and you're all correct. But let's go ahead and get into Jamboard.
Is groups of five good?
Hey, Victoria.
Hi.
Uh, I am not sure what happened with the breakouts. Oh, perfect. They were okay. I got put into one right away, and I was like, "Did I do that? What's happening?"
Oh, it's me.
Okay. I will head
I
back
made sure I just clicked. Maybe you were already assigned to one. Maybe that's what happened.
probably.
It was yeah, so it was just put people in the rooms without them having to click on it.
Got it.
Because I think last time some people were like, I don't know how to, yeah.
Got it. Hello, Carla. Hello, Andrea. Um, are y'all having trouble joining your breakout rooms? Oh, maybe they're not here. And then they don't get to click to join. Do you feel like people got good instructions and know what they're doing?
I feel like we should hop in and check in.
All right, I'm gonna go back into my room then.
But let me go into there.
I guess I could have waited. Cool. I think that's everyone.
Oh, welcome back, everybody. Hope you all got a chance to talk within your groups. I got to float in between a couple groups, and we had some really good ideas on how we could cut this turf up and distribute. I think in the practice of time, we don't necessarily need to share out. What do you think, Desiree? Yeah. Um, how about this? One person, does one person want to come off of mute or go in the chat and share what their group talked about?
I can go. My group, I've never cut turf before. We were the breakout room 5, and some of them had mentioned like making sure not to like cross a major roadway, and to also think like logically of like how much your team would need for or like the amount of doors they would need. So yeah.
That's good. Yeah. I think that and I heard in another group some similar stuff. Another one was grouping. We were looking at one of the corners and saying, oh, well, this corner at the top is really nice and compact, and we wouldn't necessarily want to connect it as part of a larger turf. And then there is another opposite corner where it looked super huge, but they were all right next to each other. And so we just kind of talked about the pros and cons of creating larger chunks of turf and what canvassers would experience. So that's good stuff. We're gonna go ahead and move on. And we talked about this already, but just as a recap, once you have your turf solidified, once it's done, you save it in that correct folder. You go ahead and name it the way that you need to. And then you give it a little description so those who may have also access to this can understand what it is. So we'll go ahead and move to the next slide. And again, this super, super cool thing, if you go on the top right corner of quick actions, it'll pop up a bunch of different options for you. You can print it, you can export, you can generate a list number, send to minivan, or print for minivan. The most important piece for me that I would say is generating that list number. That gets you started off with your campaign. So that's really crucial. That gives you a way to know where the doors are. That gives the canvassers a reference point. And they can put that into their phones. They can put it into the app and track it on their phone. Okay. Cool. And so when you go ahead and generate that list number, there will be a few different options as to what you want to be a part of it. And so list numbers, of course, they can help you keep track of which turfs have been assigned for canvassing, and volunteers use it on their phones. But when you go in and look at it, there's various types of things that I can't really see, but I'm going to talk about it. Thank you. So if you scroll up, so it'll have, you scroll up real quick.
Ooh. Like this?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
So it'll say what type of list, and you want a walking list, and then you can attach a script to it. And so if it's a campaign that you're using, you can attach that specific script to it. So for this one, it would be like the example script that we created earlier. And then how are you contacting them? Again, you'd say walk, and then it load up the title, and then you can attach it to the campaign that you're going to be doing. And then there are different ways you can sort the homes. You can sort it by alphabetical order. You can sort it in different ways. That's really all up to you and preference and what your campaign is looking for. But the important stuff, if you scroll to if you zoom out real quick.
The next one. Go to the next slide.
Can you go back 1 second?
This one?
That one, the next one. Yes. Sorry.
I know the zooming in makes it a little.
Yeah, it's all good. You have the, yeah, so essentially when you have all your selections in order, you can decide or not if you want to click these two checkbox marks. Sometimes they're already selected, sometimes they're not. But you generate list number and you click that button, and that lets you populate your list. And you can also use this to print. And so if there are folks who don't have access to phones, you can use a walking list and print out a packet. And it'll be the same situation, a similar situation. You'll have your script, you'll have your doors, you'll have the responses that you can gather with a pen and paper. It'll have all the information there for you. Can you go to the next slide? Cool. Can you go back one? Awesome. So that was a brief overview of how to generate a list number. Those are pretty important. But as we keep it moving, now it's about the back end. So you hit the doors. What do you do now?
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. Once your canvassers are out, they have knocked doors, they have collected data. The next thing you need to do is commit that data. What does it mean to commit data? Actually, I'll open that for responses. From folks in the room, what is your understanding of what it means to commit data?
Committing data is putting syncing all work
Syncing your work.
and getting the people that you surveyed and which people were canvassed on your which canvasser canvassed who.
Yeah,
just sync the doors.
Oh, go ahead, Esme.
Just sync the doors.
Yeah.
And like everybody's doors.
Syncing doors, yes. Any other folks want to come off mute and talk about committing data?
Committing data also shows the results of how many doors were hit, total by all canvassers, how many canvassers hit how many doors, and yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so when you're committing data, you're looking at all of those things. Which canvassers went out? Who did they talk to? How many doors did they hit? The other step of committing data is usually like a field director or a canvas lead will be looking at the numbers and just kind of saying like, this data looks accurate. This looks correct. This is, oh, actually, can we go to the next slide, please? This is what I'm describing is the old way of committing data. It's the way things still currently work, but it is about to get replaced. So we will talk about all this, and I just want you all to know that we will talk about what's coming too, because there are some big changes coming. But basically, yeah, your Canvas lead will look at everything, everything looks correct, and then they will say commit that data, and it kind of finalizes. It saves what you've synced back when you were knocking doors with your canvassers. It will save it to your CRM, and then it'll become data that other people will see who are using the same committee as you. So if tomorrow you have a canvas of the same area to hit everyone who wasn't home during your canvas today, then it will be like, okay, I'm committing this data, and now everyone who wasn't home has that updated contact on their record, and that'll help pool our list for tomorrow. So it is verifying the data, and it is making it final, putting it into the database as like a final draft. It's important to note that you don't want to commit incorrect data because it can impact future canvases that people are doing. So when it comes to like how the data shows up to be committed, when you're canvassing, right, and you're using MiniVAN, we clicked that enable auto sync button when we first created our MiniVAN campaign, right? And canvassers can also hit a sync button. And when that happens, the data from somebody's MiniVAN app, they're canvassing a certain list, it's getting sent back to your CRM. It's getting sent back to Van, Smart Van, right? As like, this is a door that was knocked. This is the response that we got. This is how this person responded to our name recognition question. This is how somebody responded to our voter registration question. And that's all getting synced back. And then your Canvas lead, or if you're the Canvas lead, you will go back to the MiniVAN commit page. And from there, you'll see all the data that has been synced back from everybody who's doing the campaign. It could be that you have people in Tempe and people in Chandler and people in Scottsdale, and you'll see all of that data come back to your MiniVAN commit page where you have a chance to look at it, verify that it looks accurate, and then do that final save and put it into the database. Some of the things you can filter by on the MiniVAN commit page are the things that you mentioned. You can filter by canvasser. You can filter by status. You can filter by whether the data is pending or it's already been committed. You can filter by the date. So like, oh, was it today's canvas or was it yesterday's canvas? And you can even see the individual syncs that canvassers did. So if like they sync after every door, you'll see all of those syncs. And a big part of committing data is what we call quality control. Victoria, can we go to the next slide, please? Oh, well, next slide. Next slide. This is the MiniVAN commit page, by the way. All right, next slide, please. Quality control. So when you're doing quality control and you're the canvassing lead, you want to look at a few things to make sure that your data is accurate. And things are like contact rates, right? When you're out knocking doors, for folks who knock doors, how many people out of 100 usually like actually answer their door for you? Feel free to drop it in the chat or come off mute of what's like a normal number of people who actually answer the door, who you actually get to have a conversation with when you're canvassing. All right, we're seeing between 17 to 15%, about 10 out of 40. Right, so if you were to see like, oh, actually this canvasser has a 100% contact rate, you'd be like, oh, there's maybe a data error here. They entered some data in incorrectly because that's not a normal contact rate. Or maybe their contact rate is 0 and you need to check with them first. Like what happened? Was it a weird day where just like absolutely nobody answered a door? maybe the time we're going canvassing is not a great time, or maybe the data was just entered incorrectly. Another thing you can check is like, are responses within a normal range? Like when you're at the door and you get those, 10 out of 40 people who actually open the door and talk to you. Maybe it's normal for 5 out of 10 to say like they agree with this survey question, or they strongly agree with this survey question. And then you have a canvas that comes in and the data says like actually 100% of people strongly disagreed. Maybe that's out of the normal range. You'd want to check in with the canvasser, like what were the conversations like? Maybe that's not a neighborhood you want to be canvassing in the future, or maybe there's a data error. And then one other thing, you want to make sure that the hard data, so like the quantitative numbers that are in VAN, match the soft data, or the experience that your canvasser had with soft reporting. That's like the anecdotal information that you have as a canvasser. So let's go to the next slide and just talk a little bit about what to do if the data looks wrong. So let's say you sent your canvas out and you're reviewing data before you commit it, and you have a canvasser who they got contacts, they got people who responded to their survey questions, but you notice that like a majority of the responses from your expected supporters were like 5 strongly disagree with your issue identification question. You might look then at your canvasser's soft report, and then they're like, oh, I had an amazing time. Everybody I talked to was so positive and really supportive. They were friendly, and it was a really great canvas today. What do you think might be the issue there if the survey questions all say 5 strongly disagree, but your canvasser says I had a bunch of really positive interactions? And I'll go ahead and pause and let folks drop in the chat.
The canvasser probably put it wrong. He probably thought 5 was like really good.
Yeah, and that happens all the time, right? It's a very easy mistake to make. This canvasser probably meant to hit 1 strongly agree and accidentally hit 5 strongly disagree. So what might we need to do to fix our data before we commit it? And feel free to jump off mute or type in the chat. All right. Just in the interest of getting everyone out on time, something you might want to do is like go back into the data, and if they said, oh yeah, this is the mistake I made. I put 5 when I meant to put 1, and I put 1 when I meant to put 5. So all of my strongly agrees should be strongly disagree, and all of my strongly disagrees should be strongly agrees. Then you as the Canvas lead can go in and fix the data and then re-upload that person's data to be committed. And then you can, now that the error is fixed, you can commit that data. So once you've reviewed your data, you know that it's up to quality control. You just hit commit and your data is going to get processed. And when that happens, it'll move from pending to committed. Now, if you've ever done a bulk upload, or if you've ever been waiting for your data to be committed, you know that it takes time, and it can take longer if a lot of people are committing data at the same time. So it could take 30 minutes, it could take an hour, it could happen very quickly depending on how much data has to be processed. But you have your data is going to get processed and it's going to get committed once you hit that commit button. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. This is actually like, once you're done with quality control, you hit commit. Next slide, please. All right, so now I told y'all things are going to be changing a little bit with minivan commit. So I'm going to talk about what new process is coming, and it hasn't gone into effect just yet, but it's coming very soon. Next slide, please. All right, so we want to talk about auto sync, auto commit, and data rollbacks. Auto sync, we saw that that was something we could enable when we created our minivan campaign. It is a feature of minivan, but auto commit is now also part of this process. Under this change, not only would the data auto sync from your canvassers' phones back to your CRM to be committed, but then it'll also be auto committed every 30 minutes without the manual process of like, let me look at this data, let me quality control it, let me hit commit. And so this is a really big change. It is going to replace the minivan commit page with a report page that shows you which data has been auto committed. And now, instead of doing the quality control process before committing our data, this is where the rollback process will come in. We'll be doing quality control kind of after the fact. We'll see the data that has been auto committed. We'll have a chance to review it for quality control. And if we find errors, then we'll be able to roll back the data that was committed. It's going to allow you to edit or delete that inaccurate data that had been automatically committed. And it should work for both committed and uncommitted data. So if it's between that 30-minute time period before the data gets auto committed, you would still be able to roll it back before it gets auto committed. I will say there's a lot we don't know yet about the auto sync, auto commit, rollback process and how it's all going to work together, because it hasn't been rolled out and we haven't had a chance to like play with it, practice with it, see what it actually does on a canvas. But the One Arizona team and the AV Arizona team are both in talks with the folks at VAN to make sure that we have access to their help desk. And I will also, all of our organizations will be making sure that we uplift any upcoming trainings and materials and opportunities to learn about auto commit and rollback once they become available, because VAN has promised that they are going to be sending out robust training materials for that. Next slide, please. All right. So when it comes to reporting the data that you've gotten through your canvassing, you can use Report Manager to run the reports on your canvas. Reports can be run whenever you'd like. You can pop into Report Manager and run a report anytime, but you can also schedule them to auto send. So maybe you want a report on the canvas from the day before every morning at 8 a.m. So you show up to the office at 9 or at 8 and your report is waiting for you and you can see everything that happened the day before. Auto scheduling is a really good tool and I really like it. And I think it could be really helpful for folks. Some of the types of reports you can run are contact history reports. So it'll show you all of the people who got contacted in the last 14 days. You can narrow the type of contact, and it is a default contact. You can run counts and crosstabs. This will return counts of voters by a combination of survey questions and activist codes. So maybe you want a report of like everyone who is contacted, and that's your contact history report. But you also maybe want a counts and crosstabs that shows you just the high line of like, how many people did we talk to that said they, one, fully support, our campaign? Okay, that's the number. We also just want to pull it out and highlight it. You can do a canvassing summary report, which will show you all canvas result activity. And you can do a survey question summary that will kind of show results by a team or maybe by a location. And again, all of these will be under your report manager. Most instances of van and smart van also have a voter contact menu. And it looks like a dashboard. I think, Victoria, there is an image of it on the next slide. Yes. We're not using MiniVAN to canvas at this moment at Instituto, so there's nothing in this dashboard. However, this dashboard will be a place where you can get like a high-level overview of your lists, your canvas activity, the progress of your phone banks. It also has quick links to your canvas results report, your MiniVAN activity report, and the MiniVAN commit page for now while we're still using it. And I'm sure that that will be replaced with the report page with auto commit when that rolls out. So that's kind of the high level overview of committing and reporting your MiniVAN data. And from here, I'll pass it to Victoria.
Thank you so much, Brandon and Desiree. This was great. I wanted to ask you also, as a data team, we want to collect information from you all. So we want to ask you to please fill out this survey. I don't have the link in front of me, Desiree, so if you have it, or Brandon, if y'all can drop it in the chat. There you go. And please fill out this survey. So one of the things that we do here at Instituto is provide like coaching and direct support. So if there's questions that are lingering, I know this was a lot of content, please let us know. There's an area here in this survey for you all to be able to give us feedback about this training and just let us know. This is the first time we do this training, and any information that you share with us will be super, super helpful as we continue to provide these type of services. And also if there's anything specific with your program or campaign that we can support with, we definitely would like to, be able to have more information sooner rather than later about what are the type of questions that you have. So here's the survey. There's also the QR code for you all to fill out. And we would love to have a really good completion rate for this survey. And that's it. That is a training for today. Thank you so much to our co-facilitators. Thank you all for joining us.